Hey guys, tonight we're slipping through the wormhole of time into a world so uncomfortable, so unsanitary, and so utterly brutal that, well, you probably won't survive this. Imagine waking up not to the soothing hum of an air purifier, but to the unmistakable aroma of manure, unwashed bodies, and wet hay. This isn't just a themed Renaissance fair. This is your new reality. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're jolted awake by a sharp, stabbing itch. Your straw mattress, harder than a yoga mat and scratchier than your grandma's old couch, has become a thriving metropolis of fleas, lice, and other six-legged residents. You groggily swat at your arms. Too late. You've already got bites. That sharp sting in your ribs? Not a cramp. Just a flea that decided you'd make a great midnight snack. It's barely dawn, and the world outside your timber-framed hovel is already alive, with the sounds of hacking coughs, clanging buckets, and the moan of someone who clearly lost a fight with last night's mead. But let's focus on your room, or what passes for one. Your shared sleeping space, barely wide enough to stretch your arms, reeks of damp hay, mold, and chamber pot overflow. Yes, you're sharing your space with a sloshing bucket of last night's business. Let's just say you won't be lighting a candle in here unless you want to risk a methane explosion. Your clothes, by the way, are not neatly folded on. A chair. They're on your body, because you sleep in them. And you've slept in them all week, possibly all month. The fabric, coarse wool or rough linen, is stiff with dried sweat, yesterday's stew, and, if we're being honest, a few bugs of its own. And yet you're better off than many. Historians still argue whether most peasants even owned more than a single change of clothes, or if that's just a modern fantasy. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, into your boots if you're lucky, or your bare feet if you're not, and immediately step on something squishy. No time to investigate, probably just a rat, or the remains of one. Either way, it's squishier than you'd like this early in the day. Outside, the communal courtyard greets you like an unwanted hug. A mixture of mud and manure squelches underfoot as chickens scuttle by, pecking at who knows what. Someone's baby is already screaming, and an old man is relieving himself against a tree that has clearly given up on growing. A woman nearby throws the contents of her chamber pot directly into the alley with a lazy flick. You narrowly avoid it, barely. The smell wafts in anyway, stinging your nostrils like a forgotten milk carton in a hot car. Bathing? That's funny. Unless you're incredibly wealthy, or some sort of religious obsessive, you're probably not doing much of that. Soap exists, sure, but it's made from animal fat and lye. Scrubbing your skin with it feels like exfoliating with sandpaper and regret. And that's if you can even get your hands on it. Most people just rinse occasionally. In the river. You know, the same one that handles laundry, fishing, and waste disposal. So go ahead, take your chances. The parasites are feeling friendly this season. It's worth noting that medieval people didn't think of clean the same way we do. Many believed too much bathing could weaken the body or invite illness. There's a quirky tidbit for you. Nobles might dab themselves with perfumed cloths instead of bathing. You're not a noble, of course, so forget the perfume. You smell like last week's cabbage and 3 types of livestock. One surprising upside: you won't be late for work, mostly because your job is just survive today. And you can do that right here, hauling water, fixing fences, and not dying. But survival isn't free. A small tax is due on everything: your hut, your land, even your chickens. It's collected by someone you're definitely going to meet later. Spoiler: he's not here for a pleasant chat. Right now, you hear your neighbors waking up too. A chorus of coughs, groans, and one unfortunate individual vomiting behind a hut. Probably that meat again. And just as you start to feel something, like balance, your stomach growls. A warning, really, for what's about to come. We'll get to that. Next section. Your stomach's rumble has now escalated into a full protest. But don't get too excited. Breakfast isn't exactly a luxurious affair. You shuffle toward the fire pit, where a blackened pot sits steaming gently with something vaguely edible. On the table, or rather, the wooden plank nailed between two crates, you find today's offerings: a chunk of stale, crusty bread and a slosh of ale that's more water than wheat. No butter, no jam, no eggs unless you own a chicken. And guess what? Your chicken got borrowed last night. Probably by that guy who always smells like wet moss. You tear at the bread with your teeth. It's tough enough to qualify as medieval dental floss. And no, you don't have dental insurance. Actually, you don't even have a toothbrush. At best, a twig. At worst, nothing at all. Most folks in your time think bad teeth are normal, until they rot out entirely, and you're stuck gumming your cabbage at 28. You sip the weak ale, hoping it'll help soften the bread. Water is technically an option, but considering it might be fetched from a nearby stream that also serves as a laundry site, bath zone, and cow crossing, you choose the ale. It's not tasty, but it's the least likely to kill you today. Meanwhile, around you, the morning buzz picks up. Kids chase a pig through the yard. Someone is already shouting about a missing boot. But the best part of this medieval breakfast: experience? The communal eating. You don't have a private table or even a separate bowl. You eat with your hands from shared platters, surrounded by sniffles, coughs, and one guy who clearly does not understand personal space. That man next to you, he sneezes violently into the stew. You pause, stare, then keep eating, because that's how things are. Germ theory won't be widely accepted for centuries, and washing hands? Only something monks do ritually, not out of hygiene. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood any cause and effect between filth and illness, or whether they just blamed bad smells and angry spirits. And the smells. Oh, the smells. You'd think your nose would get used to the medley of human funk, barnyard funk, and rotting fish on warm rock funk. But no, every breath is a new sensory betrayal. A quirky little footnote here. Some folks tried to ward off disease by carrying small pouches of herbs called pomanders, or even stuffing dried flowers up their noses. You? You don't have that kind of budget. Still chewing your leathery bread, you glance at the pot of pottage, the go-to peasant meal. Imagine a gloopy mess of boiled grains, maybe a carrot, maybe a turnip, maybe yesterday's leftover bone. It's thick, warmish, and deeply sad. But it keeps you alive, and that's the whole point. The most luxurious thing you'll eat today might be a slice of cheese, assuming the rats haven't gotten to it. Meat, rare, salted, dried, and doled out like treasure. Eggs, only if you're not selling them for coins to pay taxes. The concept of a balanced breakfast, complete with protein, fiber, and a dairy option. Yeah, That's a fantasy reserved for the year 2000 and a cereal commercial. Let's not forget the insects. Not only do they buzz around your food, especially in warmer months, but sometimes they're just in the food. Maggots in meat, weevils in grain. And unless you want to go hungry, you eat them. Extra protein, right? Now, as you gnaw your way through the medieval version of granola, someone brings in news from the village over. More cases of sweating sickness. No one knows exactly what it is. People just start sweating, then shaking, and then they die. Fast. It's terrifying, but not unusual. You just sigh and keep eating. That's how most things go in your world. Quiet acceptance of the terrible, the gross, the tragic, and don't bother complaining. There's no Yelp review for this breakfast experience. You don't even have a spoon. You might share one with your family, or you might just use your fingers. Either way, good luck avoiding dysentery. Even better luck keeping your stomach from revolting in the next few hours. Meanwhile, you see the Lord Steward trotting past, his boots far cleaner than yours, his cloak stitched with patterns you'll never afford. He doesn't eat the same stew. He gets venison, honey, wine, and spices imported from far-off lands you've only heard about in the sermons. You chew your carrot string and pretend you don't care. But you do. And while you're fantasizing about a warm croissant or even a cold Pop-Tart, a goat bleats beside you and sneezes directly onto your knee. Somehow this is still not the worst part of your day, because breakfast is over. And now, the real work begins. Your belly may be somewhat full of bread, goat sneeze, and existential dread, but the day isn't pausing for your digestion. The sun, now casting a weak golden light over the thatched rooftops, signals it's time for morning chores. And, no, you don't get to check your calendar, or sip a latte first. Your schedule is simple. Everything that needs doing, you do it. And preferably before the local reeve notices you dragging your feet. First up, water. You grab 2 wooden buckets with iron handles, one cracked, the other just heavy enough to sprain something, and head toward the nearest stream. It's half a mile away. Along the way, you pass a cow relieving itself on a path that also doubles as the village's main walkway. You sidestep it, but not well. Your foot squelches into something warm. You sigh. Just another squishy morning. You reach the stream, but it's not peaceful or idyllic. A pig is bathing upstream, and someone's socks are soaking on a rock. Still, you dunk the buckets in, slimy moss and all, and start the return hike. No Fitbit will congratulate you for this walk. Your shoulders ache, your wrists burn, and by the time you get back, most of the water has sloshed out anyway. Next? Dung. Always dung. You grab a wooden shovel and begin clearing out the animal pen. Cows, pigs, maybe a goat, if your family's lucky. All of them have spent the night converting yesterday's cabbage scraps into steaming piles of joy. You scrape and scoop, trying not to breathe through your nose. Spoiler, you breathe through your nose. Some mornings, if it's early enough, you might see a local gong farmer, a truly unfortunate soul responsible for clearing human waste from latrines. These folks usually work at night, digging through cesspits and carting off their contents for disposal. Historians still argue whether they were reviled or respected, but one thing's certain. You don't envy them. After cleaning the pen, you scatter hay for the animals. Hay you helped harvest last summer in back-breaking fashion. That back pain you've been ignoring since age 12, it's not going anywhere. You feel it now, twinging with each twist of your torso, a persistent reminder that ergonomic design is still centuries away. Next on your to-do list of misery, firewood. You trudge toward the woodshed where logs are stacked like a cruel Jenga tower. You collect what you can carry, heavy, splintery bundles that dig into your forearms, and haul it back to the hearth. You're sweating now, even though the air's still chilly. But congratulations, you've earned the right to boil water for laundry, or soup, or foot soaking, or nothing, because you're out of clean kindling. Speaking of laundry, if today happens to be your wash day, you're in for a true medieval treat. Clothes are soaked in lye soap and then beaten on rocks by the river, or wrung out in a wooden tub until your arms feel like cooked noodles. There's no bleach, no spin cycle, no fabric softener, just you, your wrinkling hands, and the distinct smell of wet wool, which is best described as barnyard stew. But hey, at least you're not dealing with a medieval laundry curiosity. Urine-based cleaning. Yes, in some regions, stale urine was collected and used as a cleaning agent due to its ammonia content. And if you're wondering how they stored it, let's just say you might be brushing elbows with a pee bucket at this very moment. Back in the yard, your siblings, or your kids, if you're unlucky enough to have started young, are collecting eggs, fetching kindling, or wrangling a rogue piglet that keeps escaping the pen. You shout, they ignore you. The pig wins. Again. You pause briefly to drink from the bucket you carried earlier. It's already tepid. A leaf floats in it. You drink anyway, not because you trust it, but because dehydration would make today even worse. The lingering ache in your back reminds you that you still have to tend the vegetable patch, patch the fence, and repair the hole in the roof that keeps dripping directly onto your bed. Oh, and mend your shoes. You know, the ones with soles so thin you can feel every pebble through them like some twisted medieval reflexology. By now you're soaked in sweat. At least you hope it's just sweat, and your tunic sticks to your skin like a wet dishcloth. You wipe your brow with your sleeve, which only smears more grime across your face. There's a peculiar comfort in knowing this is as good as you're going to look today. There are no mirrors in your hut, and honestly, that's probably a blessing. A distant bell rings, signaling midday. Not lunch, not break time, just the passing of time. Your only measure of how long you've been hauling, scooping, stomping, and scrubbing. You look up at the sky. Still hours to go. And remember, that's just your life on a good day. You don't get a lunch break. Not in the way you're used to. There's no shaded picnic table, no brown bag sandwich, no neatly sliced apple. What you get is a moment, a quiet sliver of time between hauling firewood and chasing a goat back into its pen. If you're lucky, someone's ladled out another scoop of pottage from the morning, now thicker, cooler, and crusted around the edges of the pot like it's given up on life. You sit on a worn log. The kind that's been sat on for so long it's almost concave. The stew is lukewarm, flecked with barley and the odd bit of root vegetable, maybe even a shard of meat, though you're not entirely sure which animal it came from. You don't ask, you just eat. A buzz of flies surrounds you. One lands on your bowl. You wave it off with one hand while spooning the mush into your mouth with the other. It's all about balance now. Speed versus hygiene. Hunger versus gag reflex. Welcome to midday in medieval life. Across from you, someone's muttering about the local lord raising taxes again. Seems he's planning to host a feast for visiting nobles. And naturally that means squeezing more grain, labor, and livestock from the people who can least afford it. Historians still argue whether the average peasant resented the nobility quietly or just considered it an unchangeable fact, like rain or fleas. Speaking of which, you scratch your scalp. It's probably lice. Almost everyone has them. Fleas, too. You remember how they bit your legs last night, and how you scratched until your skin felt raw. There's a certain intimacy you've developed with these pests, a real parasite pet situation. There's no such thing as privacy, by the way, not even now. As you eat, relieve yourself behind a hay bale, or change clothes, when you have spare clothes, someone is always nearby. In the village, in the fields, in the tiny smoky hut you call home. Privacy is a luxury reserved for monks and nobles. Maybe. After your meal, it's back to work, but this time, you're off to the fields. That is, unless you're one of the lucky, red-cursed, few drafted into helping build or maintain the Lord's projects. Roads, fences, storehouses, or worse, castle walls. The stones are heavy, the tools are crude, and the reward is sore hands and a mouthful of dust. But if you're just a regular peasant today, the open field is your office. You grab your hoe or rake or scythe, or whatever's still in one piece, and head toward the strip of land your family farms. It's not your land, of course. It belongs to the Lord, just like you technically do. But you're allowed to till and grow on it, provided you pay your share in grain and labor. The work is backbreaking. You swing the tool over and over, your arms already trembling from this morning's chores. The sun climbs. Sweat pools behind your knees and soaks the small of your back. You're bent for hours, barely pausing. Sometimes you find a rock that splits your blade. Sometimes you unearth something odd, like a bone. Human? Animal? You don't ask. You just toss it aside. There's no sunscreen. No wide-brimmed hat. Just a scrap of cloth wrapped around your head to keep the hair and sweat out of your eyes. The heat bakes your neck. Your lips crack. If you're lucky, someone passes you a jug of warm ale to swig from. If not, you lick your own sleeve and get back to it. A fringe fact to liven your toil. In some medieval communities, they believed fairies or spirits could bless or curse the crops. Farmers sometimes left offerings at the field's edge, like bits of bread or milk. You glance at your barren soil and wonder if you should start a donation box for supernatural assistance. Occasionally, you hear the church bell chime or the voice of a reeve scolding someone for leaning on their shovel. You straighten up. Your back screams. You keep going. Time in the field doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the seasons, the soil, and the whims of those above you. And just as your arms are starting to give out, a cloud of gnats finds your face. You bat them away like a half-dead scarecrow, but they always return. You might be the only snack they're getting today. There's a pause in the work when someone spots a figure on the horizon, riding fast. It's a messenger, maybe from another village. Maybe he brings word of disease, a new tithe, or worse, a call for conscription. Your stomach tightens. You watch the rider approach, then disappear down the path behind the manor. For now you return to your field, pretending you didn't see anything, pretending you didn't feel that chill. Keep your head down, someone murmurs nearby. It's half advice, half warning. You nod, a quick scholarly side note. Historians still debate how much autonomy peasants truly had. Some argue they lived relatively free, governed mostly by seasonal rhythms. Others suggest their lives were micromanaged in suffocating detail by local officials. Either way, here's what you know. You're tired, you're dirty, and your fingernails are lined with earth so deep it may never come out. By late afternoon, your shadow stretches long beside you. The air cools just a little. The work slows. Someone laughs weakly at a joke. Someone else coughs so hard they have to sit down. The village dog trots past, chasing something invisible. The sun begins to dip. You stand, every joint resisting. You squint toward the village, wondering what kind of stew will greet you tonight. Spoiler, it's the same one, again. You limp back into the village with straw in your hair, sweat stiffening your tunic, and fingers so raw they could pass for bark. The sun is low now, casting long golden streaks over the muddy paths and crumbling fences. Chickens dart across your feet as you dodge a rut filled with gray water and something floating. You're not looking too closely. You've learned not to. Evening is when things should slow down. But in medieval life, rest is more of a concept than a reality. There's still a list of tasks to get through, even if your muscles scream in protest. A leaky roof tile to patch. A broken hinge to rig together with twine. A child with a splinter that's turned a worrying shade of green. You wish you could say you're winding down, but instead, you're just reallocating misery. And of course, there's dinner to prepare. You're back by the hearth now, coaxing a stubborn fire to life with a bundle of twigs and a lot of whispered threats. Someone adds more water to the pot, again. It's the universal sign that food will be thinner tonight. You grab what you've got, more barley, a bit of salt, and that weird vegetable someone found growing near the privy. It might be edible. It might be sentient. You chop it up anyway. The cooking pot is blackened, dented, and soot-streaked, but it's your most valuable tool, equal parts stove, sink, and occasional laundry bucket. You stir the stew slowly, watching it bubble and blur, the day's events rising with the steam. A neighbor limps in to borrow a spoon. You exchange a nod and a brief update. The pigs got out again. A fox snatched 2 hens. Old Tom fell into the well but somehow didn't die. Again. There's a soft undercurrent of camaraderie in these updates. Misery shared is misery slightly lessened. By now, the younger children are curled up on straw pallets, already half asleep from sheer exhaustion. The older ones help grind more grain, twisting the stone mill slowly. It's rhythmic, hypnotic. Your hands ache just watching them. One of the few diversions in the evening might be storytelling, gathering around the fire to hear someone recount a local legend or the same ghost story they've told 100 times. But you listen anyway. The tale of the screaming monk who wanders the woods, or the knight whose armor melted in battle, fusing to his bones. Is any of it true? Probably not. But it beats discussing crop yields. Here's a fun fact to chew on. With your stew, some medieval folks believed cats were witches in disguise, especially black ones. And if a cat looked at you funny during dinner, you might sleep with one eye open. Just in case. You glance sideways at the family mouser, curled by the hearth. It blinks slowly, suspiciously. There's also music sometimes. Someone might pull out a crude flute or a battered fiddle and play a few haunting notes. The sound is uneven but oddly beautiful in the smoky dark. A child claps out of rhythm. Someone sings a line or two of a tune so old it might have been passed down from druids. But Soon enough, the day's weight settles like dust in the corners. You're spent. Everyone is. You scrape your wooden bowl clean, using crusty bread as your final utensil. The hearth crackles, the baby cries briefly, and then stillness. Still, there's one more task to face. Bedtime. You'd think this would be the easy part, but in medieval times, even sleep is an ordeal. First, there's the problem of space. If your family's poor, and they are, you're all crammed into one room, maybe two if your father's the village smith or you've inherited land. You're sleeping shoulder to shoulder, elbow to knee, packed tighter than dried fish in a barrel. Your mattress? It's a sack filled with straw or moss or feathers if you're blessed, but usually straw. And that straw is crawling. Lice, fleas, the occasional mouse. It's a real wildlife preserve in there. You lie down and immediately feel the bite of something that's made your shin its summer home. Your blanket is scratchy wool, possibly unwashed for months. It smells like the pig you sleep beside in winter for warmth. If you're lucky, the pig doesn't snore louder than your grandfather. Oh, and don't forget to bar the door, or at least wedge a piece of wood against it. Thieves, wolves, or worse could be prowling outside. No alarms, no deadbolts, just a prayer and some wishful carpentry. You blow out the rushlight or shutter the lantern if you have one. The room dims into shadows. The fire glows low in the hearth. You adjust your limbs, trying to find a position that doesn't press a sharp piece of straw into your spine. Then someone farts. Loudly. No one comments. It's bedtime etiquette. And yet, sleep doesn't come easy. You think about tomorrow, about the aching repeat of today, about how one bad harvest could starve you, how one fever could take your child, how one lord's whim could reroute your entire life into a war, a dungeon, or a shallow grave behind the barn. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants lived lives of deep spiritual fulfillment or constant fear. Maybe it was both. Maybe faith was the only cushion they had in this splinter-filled life. The fire pops once. Outside, an owl hoots. Someone coughs, a deep chest-rattling sound that reminds you of the plague stories your mother used to whisper when she thought you weren't listening. And somehow, in this shared darkness, this cramped wooden box of snores, sweat, and straw, you finally drift off until a rat scurries across your foot. You're awake before the sun, not because you want to be. No medieval peasant chooses to rise in the dark, but because the rooster is early again. Some toddler is wailing about a bad dream, and your shoulder feels like it's been stabbed by a broom handle. Spoiler. It's just that same twisted straw lump you sleep on every night. You stretch, groan, and try to convince your legs to cooperate. They disagree. Every joint is stiff from yesterday's labor, and your spine is throwing a quiet tantrum. Someone beside you shifts under the blanket, mumbling something incoherent. Maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. It's too early to care. There's no brushing your teeth, no warm shower. Just a cold splash of water from the rain barrel, if you're lucky enough to have one that's not frozen over or growing something. You scrub your face with the edge of your sleeve, which, let's be honest, is just a portable napkin at this point. The smell? You've stopped noticing. But newcomers would say you carry the charming aroma of sweat, onions, and barn. Your clothes are the same as yesterday, and the day before that. A tunic of coarse wool, patched and threadbare in all the wrong places, hose that sag and twist like exhausted snakes. If it's winter, you might layer on a second tunic and hope the moths left some of it intact. Undergarments? Technically, yes, but comfort is not part of the package. You grab a chunk of stale bread to chew on. It's as dense as a roof tile and twice as crumbly. There's a hint of mold on the edge. You pick it off with a shrug and munch. Welcome to breakfast. The day's first task? Tend to the animals. They're already making a racket. You trudge through. The muddy yard and shoes that are more hope than structure. The pigs squeal for food. The goats bleat with attitude. The chickens, well, you try not to look them in the eye. They've seen things. As you scatter feed, you notice the barn roofs sagging again, probably from last week's rain. You make a mental note to repair it, then immediately forget the note because a chicken just pecked your ankle with terrifying accuracy. Once the animals are fed, it's time to check the privy, because sanitation is a daily gamble. Now let's be clear. Bathroom is a generous word. What you have is a wooden box with a hole in it, perched over a pit that reeks like a dragon's armpit. You approach it like a knight approaching a cursed cave. The stench could knock out a bishop. This, by the way, is the upgraded version. Some households just dig shallow trenches. In towns, cesspits fill quickly, and cleaning them out is a job so foul it earns hazard pay, if anyone paid anyone at all. One curious fringe tidbit. In larger cities, it wasn't uncommon for people to just empty their chamber pots out the window with a quick, "Garde l'eau," watch out for the water, as a warning. Sometimes you use the privy quickly. Very quickly. There are spiders, and possibly a raccoon. You don't want to find out. Bathing, if you're wondering, is rare. The whole medieval people never bathed myth is exaggerated, but they certainly didn't lather up daily. Most folks washed hands and faces regularly, but full body immersion? That's a festival-level event, or a church mandate, or, occasionally, a health emergency. Public bathhouses existed, especially in larger towns, but eventually fell out of favor, partly because of fears around immorality, disease, or just bad plumbing. Historians still argue whether the average peasant truly smelled worse than their environment, or if everyone had simply adapted to the rustic perfume of manure and sweat. You, however, are deeply aware of the situation every time the wind changes direction. Back indoors, someone's trying to start the fire again. The smoke curls in thick, lazy ropes along the rafters. The chimney is more of a theory than a structure, so everything smells faintly of ash. You help blow on the embers. Your breath fogs. Your fingers are numb. Food preparation begins again. Another pot of pottage, this time with leftover beans and something that might be a turnip. Someone mentions that Old Mary swears by adding beer to the mix for flavor. You consider it but decide to drink the beer instead. Small beer, barely fermented, but safer than the water that runs downstream from 3 other villages. There's a brief lull as you prepare to head into the fields again. But wait, you have other errands. Today is market day. You throw on your cloak, holy but proud, and grab a basket. It's time to barter. The village green is where all the magic and mayhem happens. Traders with handcarts, women shouting about eggs, a guy selling miracle tonic in a jug that smells suspiciously like cabbage water. There's music, off-key lute plucking, and dogs chasing each other under stalls. You make your way through the crowd, dodging elbows and ducking under banners. You've brought a few eggs to trade, maybe a bit of yarn. You're hoping to get some dried fish or a new knife. You haggle. Poorly. The fishmonger sees you coming and doubles the price. You argue. You fail. You hand over your goods and mutter a half-hearted insult under your breath. One fun fact about medieval markets. Some were governed by strict rules. You couldn't sell butter after sundown, for instance, or haggle too loudly near a church. But in your little village, it's more like the Wild West with mud. One time someone sold a dragon tooth that turned out to be a pig tusk. The kid who bought it still insists it glows at night. As you browse, you hear gossip. A new plague in the next county. A baker caught watering down ale. A pig that gave birth to 9 piglets and a goat. Not at the same time, thankfully. Maybe. You trade, you scowl, you shuffle. Then it's time to head back. Your basket is heavier now. You carry it low, wrist aching, back hunching again. You pass the blacksmith's forge, the clanging ringing in your ears. You glance up at the manor house on the hill, looming like a bored predator. The Lord's banner flaps lazily in the breeze. A reminder of who really owns everything here. The sun's climbing. You're tired again. You never really stop being tired. You trudge home. The path back from the market is rutted, lined with stones that somehow always manage to jab directly into your heel. You switch hands, then shoulders, then back again, trying to carry your heavy basket without permanently damaging a vertebra. The village dogs bark at you, half friendly, half deranged, and a gaggle of geese charges past like they're late for a royal wedding. You step aside. You've learned not to mess with geese. No one wins. You finally arrive home, only to be greeted by the smell of something burning. Fantastic. Someone left the stew on. You rush in and yank the pot off the fire. The bottom is scorched, the smell acrid. It'll take hours to scrub that pot, if you even have enough clean water for it. No one's apologizing. Everyone's too busy. Your spouse is mending a shoe with one hand while stirring grain with the other. One of the kids is trying to repair a cracked bowl using beeswax and what looks like a chicken feather. You don't even ask. You just sigh and add clean, ruined stew pot to your internal checklist of eternal misery. But you can't deal with it yet, because now it's time for your least favorite ritual of the week. Paying dues to your lord. Oh, yes. You may work the land, you may feed the village, but don't you forget, you don't own any of it. Not the crops, not the animals, not even the land your hovel squats on. That all belongs to the lord of the manor, whose job is essentially to remind you of your place and occasionally take your best pig. You trudge up the slope to the manor house. It's not a castle, really, more of a fortified manor, but compared to your shack, it may as well be Versailles. Stone walls, a roof that doesn't leak, a door that doesn't need to be wedged shut with a rock. It's paradise. At the entrance, you wait your turn. A queue of villagers shuffles forward, each holding a tax or a tribute, a sack of grain, a pail of milk. One guy's brought a bundle of firewood so large he's practically wearing it. You've got a few eggs and some onions. It's not much, but you're hoping the steward doesn't sneer too hard. The steward, by the way, is the middle management villain of your world. He's not the Lord himself. He's the guy the Lord hires to make your life terrible. He tallies your goods, sniffs your eggs, and mutters something about short wait. You force a polite smile and resist the urge to scream into your cloak. Then comes the sermon. You're lucky, you know. The Lord is very generous this season. Only a third of your harvest, not half. And He's not sending you to dig ditches again. Count your blessings. You do not count them, because they are imaginary. Historians still argue whether medieval lords offered genuine protection to their peasants, or just performed the legal equivalent of a protection racket. Sure, they might keep a band of armed men to scare off bandits, but they also are the reason you need protection, and if you ever try to leave, good luck. You're tied to the land, which sounds romantic until you realize it means you're one missed harvest away from starvation, and still legally bound to a mud patch. Oh, and don't even think about hunting in the Lord's woods. That's a hanging offense. Yes, hunting. For food. In the forest right next to your house. Those rabbits belong to the Lord. You can catch rats. Maybe a squirrel if it volunteers. There's one interesting loophole. In some villages, people foraged. Pannage. That's acorns and nuts dropped by trees. Pigs were often let loose to gobble them up before winter. But if your pig ate too many on the wrong side of the woods, you owed extra taxes. That's right. You could be fined for your pig's enthusiasm. Back home, you dump your empty basket and rub your temples. You're starving again. The burnt stew is salvageable, sort of. You add water, stir vigorously, and try not to gag. The children eat quickly. You do too, because you're heading back out, to corvée duty. Corvée labor is one of those delightful medieval customs where your lord decides, hey, I need a new road or moat or watchtower, and you're going to build it for free. You don't argue, not unless you enjoy shackles. You just show up, shovel in hand, back already aching before you begin. Today's assignment? Ditch digging. Not metaphorical. Actual ditch. You, a few neighbors, and some rickety carts. The soil is wet and heavy. The sun, though not warm, beams down with just enough strength to make you sweat. The shovel slips from your hand at least 3 times. You retrieve it each time with less dignity. You'd think this work would bring people together. Instead, it brings out everyone's passive-aggressive side. Someone complains that you're not digging straight. You snap back that their last trench looked like a drunk snake. A fight nearly breaks out. Then the steward shows up and everyone suddenly finds their rhythm again. Funny how that works. There's a brief moment, just a second, where you stand, up to stretch, and a breeze catches your face. You see the woods on the horizon, green and wild. The sky is streaked with clouds like silver brushstrokes. And for that heartbeat, it's almost peaceful. Then your shovel hits a rock and nearly snaps your wrist. You curse silently and get back to it. Hours later, you drag yourself home. The sky is purple now. A few stars peek through. The pigs grunt, lazily. The fire's down to embers. You ease into your seat, sip a mouthful of beer, and stare blankly into the hearth. You're too tired to even chew. One of the children asks a question, something innocent, something sweet. You smile and answer softly, and for a second, there's warmth. Not from the fire, but from knowing that you're all still here, still surviving, just barely. Your body protests as you rise before dawn once again. Every muscle, every joint, every ounce of energy feels borrowed from a very reluctant lender. But there's no time to argue with yourself. Today is not a normal work day. Today, the bailiff is making his rounds. Now, if you're wondering what a bailiff does in medieval life, picture this. a nosy hall monitor with a ledger, a stick, and a deeply misplaced sense of purpose. He's the Lord's eyes and ears when the Lord can't be bothered to leave his stone sanctuary. And today, he's inspecting each tenant's obligations: tools, livestock, crop rows, and, unfortunately, you. You scramble to make your corner of the world look respectable. You sweep the dirt floor with a bundle of reeds, try to smooth the worst wrinkles from your tunic, and hide the half-rotted cabbage behind a more photogenic onion. It won't help, but it makes you feel slightly more human. The bailiff arrives, accompanied by a scribe with ink-stained fingers and a face like a disapproving goose. You greet them with a slight bow and prepare for judgment. Your thatch roof? Slumping? Your fence? Dangerously porous. Your pig? Suspiciously underweight. He eyes you, then your spouse, then your children, as though deciding who to blame for the existential decay of your corner of the manor. You nod. You murmur apologies. You swear to repair the fence by next week. But you know, and he knows, and the pig definitely knows that you're lying. Once they move on, you exhale and collapse on a stool, utterly drained. It's not even mid-morning. You drink some weak ale, maybe chew on an apple if one survived the rats. Then, against all better instincts, you get up to finish your real work, because no one counts surviving the bailiff as productive labor. Your next task: spinning. Yes, spinning. Not the modern exercise kind. No, this is wool-to-thread spinning, the rhythmic, soul-numbing task of transforming tufts of sheep fluff into usable yarn. You set up your drop spindle, because you can't afford a spinning wheel, and begin the ancient dance of twirling, twisting, pulling. It's monotonous. It's meditative. It's maddening. You've done this since childhood, and your fingers know the rhythm by heart. Twist, pinch, draft, wind, repeat, forever. And yet, this is vital. Every tunic, every sock, every blanket begins with this. Without spinners, your village would freeze and itch itself to death. Historians still argue whether spinning was more of a social task or a solitary punishment from the gods. You'd vote for the latter, except you're interrupted by the neighbor's dog trying to steal your wool. You chase it away with your spindle like a medieval ninja. The afternoon sun glares through the thatch. The air inside is hot and stuffy, but it's too late in the year to sit outside without freezing your ears off. You strip off your outer layer and keep working, wiping sweat with a sleeve that already smells like goat. One of the children comes over to help card the wool, using 2 wooden paddles studded with nails to fluff and align the fibers. It's tedious, but they're eager. You show them how to flick the wrist just right. For a moment, it's almost pleasant, until the dog comes back and steals your apple core. You contemplate becoming a dog thief in return. But alas, you still have wool to spin. Evening rolls in on icy feet. The hearth is lit. A pot of watery barley stew simmers, and you savor the scent, until you realize it means your spouse added onions again. Always onions. You miss salt. Desperately. Salt, by the way, is not some throwaway seasoning here. It's valuable, expensive. Entire trade routes and taxes are built on the stuff. In fact, some lords use salt rations as a way to reward or punish peasants. And without it, your food tastes like sadness and cardboard. Dinner is quiet. The family chews slowly, mostly because chewing takes effort. and effort is in short supply. You exchange a few words about the weather, the rats in the grain shed, a neighbor's goat that apparently sings when it sneezes. You laugh once, then immediately regret wasting the energy. After eating, there's still no rest. Now comes mending, stitching clothes, patching boots, reinforcing a basket. You grab a needle and begin to repair your tunic, which now features more patches than original fabric. Your fingers are clumsy in the dim firelight. You prick yourself twice and mutter something your grandmother would frown at. One fun tidbit. In wealthier households, there might be a designated servant or wife whose job was purely sewing. In your case, it's everyone's job, all the time, forever. Even the children have learned to thread needles by age 5. They treat it like a rite of passage. I sewed my own sock today, followed by, and it doesn't fall off anymore. The kai. Night deepens. The fire cracks. A soft murmur of wind hums through the rafters. You pause. Listen. Then faintly, you hear a bell in the distance. Church bells. Not for mass, but a warning. Someone's died. Again. In a small village like yours, death is not a surprise. It's a regular visitor, a neighbor, a child, an elder. It doesn't matter. People vanish like breath in winter. Sometimes it's a fever. Sometimes a fall. Sometimes they just don't wake up. You bow your head out of habit, out of fear, out of fatigue. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers became desensitized to death or remained deeply spiritual about it. You've learned to move on, say a prayer, and keep your hands busy. There's no other choice. You stoke the fire one last time. Lay your spindle down. Crawl into the same straw-filled sleeping sack, already warm from earlier use. You curl up tight, trying not to disturb your sore hip. You listen to the soft breathing of your family, the occasional snore, the comforting crackle of flame. Your eyelids droop. But just before sleep takes you, you remember something. The steward said there's a feast day next week. No work, free ale, maybe even music. For a fleeting moment, you feel hope. Then a flea bites your ankle. You wake to the sounds of church bells, chickens, and your own joints cracking like dry twigs. It's Sunday, finally, a day of rest. Technically. See, the church insists you don't labor on the Sabbath. No farming, no spinning, no ditch digging. But they forgot to mention that cooking, cleaning, child wrangling, animal tending, and laundry don't count as labor. So sure, you're not plowing today, but you're still very much working. Your first task? Getting clean. This is harder than it sounds. Bathing in medieval times is complicated. You don't have a private tub or even running water. What you have is a battered wooden barrel in the corner of your hut, and maybe a bucket or two of cold water drawn from the communal well. Hot water, if you're lucky, comes from a pot that takes an hour to boil. You pour it in, mix it with the cold, pray it's not too icy, you undress quickly. Not because you're in a rush, but because the hut is freezing, and your breath fogs, the air like dragon smoke. You lower yourself into the tub. It creaks ominously. The water hits your skin like regret. You shiver, gasp, mutter a prayer to St. Soaplas, and scrub as fast as you can with a rough cloth and maybe some lye soap, if you haven't run out again. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were dirtier than we assume or just differently clean. Sure, you might not bathe daily, but you probably rinse off your hands and face every morning, and you definitely notice if someone smelled worse than the pigsty. which is saying something. Once your bath is over, the water's gray, and your mood matches. You pour it out, hopefully not on your own feet, and dress in your best tunic, the one with the least holes and only one mustard stain. Today, you're going to church. Church isn't optional. It's not a weekend suggestion. It's the social, spiritual, and legal center of your world. Miss a Sunday, and people start whispering. Miss two, and someone might report you. And yes, your priest absolutely keeps tabs. He's like a medieval Facebook feed. He knows who's feuding, who's sick, who's pregnant, and who definitely broke that wheelbarrow last week. You join the stream of villagers heading toward the stone chapel at the edge of the manor. It's small, cold, and smells of old wood, wet wool, and incense so thick it could stun a bear. You sit, or kneel, more like, on a hard bench or just the stone floor, and you listen. Mass is in Latin. You don't understand it. Hardly anyone does. But the tone is solemn, the chants echo, and you cross yourself when others do. It's not about comprehension. It's about rhythm, community, and fear of eternal damnation. The priest gives a sermon. Something about charity, or maybe sin, or maybe both. You try to focus, but your stomach growls like a bear in a cave. You notice the neighbor's child picking his nose. You notice your own child picking his nose. You give him the look. He stops. And then the priest says it. Next Sunday, Feast of St. Martin. You perk up, that means food. Real food. No work, dancing, jokes, music. It's one of the few days where peasants get to pretend they're alive and not just slowly decomposing. After Mass, you mingle in the churchyard. You swap gossip. Who's courting whom? Who owes who chickens? Whose fence collapsed during the windstorm? It's the medieval version of water cooler chat. And, for once, people are smiling. Then you remember, your turn to help clean the church is this afternoon. Rest day, huh? You drag yourself back after lunch, a hunk of cheese and some rye bread, and join the cleaning crew. 3 women, 2 children, and 1 old man who mostly just critiques. You sweep the floor, polish the candlesticks, and try to scrape wax off. A pew using a blunt knife and sheer willpower. Someone mentions a relic arriving next month, a piece of a saint's bone. You're not sure if it's legit, but it might bring pilgrims, which means extra bread to sell, which means actual coins? You don't dare hope. Quirky fact time. Medieval people loved relics. The weirder the better. Hair from a martyr's beard. A chip from the true cross. Even breast milk from the Virgin Mary. Yes, really. Some historians believe entire villages could boom or bust, depending on the popularity of their relic. Others argue most relics were probably fabricated, sold by clever monks with good stories and bad morals. Cleaning ends, you're back home. The sun's low, the shadows long. You pull your tunic tighter against the cold. A neighbor drops by with dried apples. You offer a crust of bread in return. There's laughter, a shared story, the kind that's told with big hand gestures and loud sighs. The children play outside. Tag, mostly. Or rock-kicking contests. Or mud pile climbing. You sit on a stump, sipping the last of your ale, watching them. It's peaceful. The kind of moment you tuck away for when winter comes in hard and steals the color from everything. As night falls, someone starts singing. A simple tune, old and wistful. Others join in. A few harmonies. Some claps. Someone drums on a barrel. You think about that feast day again. It's only 7 days away. You'll need to save a bit of flour, maybe borrow a chicken, maybe brew stronger ale. For now, though, you savor the silence after the song ends. The kind of silence that feels earned. You don't feel rested, but you feel okay. And in medieval times, that's almost a luxury. The next morning greets you with frost lacing the edges of your doorway and a smell in the air that promises something unpleasant. Sure enough, when you step outside, wearing your patched boots and your best grimace, you find it. One of the fight pigs is dead. Now in the 21st century, this would be a disaster that calls for phone calls, paperwork, maybe a refund. In medieval life, it's more like a full-blown existential event. That pig wasn't just meat. It was bacon, fat for cooking, a dowry booster, even a source of warmth if you were desperate. And now it's lying in the mud, bloated, staring blankly into the abyss. You call over a neighbor. Everyone always calls the neighbor who knows animals, even if he's mostly guessing. And together you examine the corpse like amateur detectives. Was it illness? A wound? A curse? Historians still argue whether medieval peasants actually believed in curses as real causes of death, or simply used them as conversational placeholders for, "We have no idea what happened." In your case, it's both. You mutter something about witches and hope no one takes it seriously. Eventually, the consensus is, it just died. Now what? You can't waste it. The body has to be processed quickly before rot sets in, so you gather knives, rope, buckets, and the least squeamish family members. The butchering begins. It's messy, cold, unpleasant, but oddly methodical. You've done it before, and so has everyone else. You separate the organs. Some are edible, some are bait. The hide, good for shoes. The meat, into the pot. And the bones, soup later. Nothing goes unused. Not even the bladder. It makes a decent storage pouch or a child's toy, depending on your creativity and lack of squeamishness. This, by the way, is what scholars refer to as subsistence living, a polite phrase meaning if you don't use everything, you lose everything. No fridges, no preservatives, and no plan B. You salt some of the pork, precious salt, and hang it in the smoke from the hearth. The rest you cook immediately. Tonight, your family eats better than they have in months. There's a strange silence as you all slurp thick slices of pork belly stew. It's almost reverent. Even the dog behaves. After the meal, you wash your hands in ash water, your best approximation of soap, and sit by the fire. You feel full, truly full. You almost smile. Then you remember. This meat was supposed to last weeks, maybe months. And now it's already half gone. So you pivot. You decide to use the animal's death as an opportunity. You'll trade the leather for eggs. Offer pig fat to the alewife in exchange for stronger drink. Maybe even sell a few bones to the traveling tinker. He collects them for some reason no one understands. By midweek, you're bartering like a champion. You trade the hide for 2 hens and a lump of beeswax. You offer a slab of cured meat for a linen kerchief. And then you make the mistake of visiting the manor steward. You go in with hope. You come out with a headache. The steward doesn't care that your pig died. He only wants to know if your dues will still be paid in full. Grain, chickens, tools. He taps his ledger and raises an eyebrow. You offer a salted ham. He sniffs it. He nods. You leave poorer, but not empty-handed. Because on the way out, you overhear something. The Lord's household is preparing for a hunt. A proper one, with dogs, horns, banners, and more people than actual animals. And the best part? They'll need beaters. Beaters are the ones who run ahead, stomping through underbrush to flush out game. It's dangerous, exhausting, and thankless, but it pays. Sort of. Maybe a coin, maybe some leftover meat, maybe a scrap of clothing that once belonged to someone fancier than you. And so, because you enjoy existing and occasionally eating, you volunteer. On the day of the hunt, you're up before dawn, your stomach mostly empty, and your legs already aching. You trudge alongside a dozen others, mostly young men with sticks, and sharp elbows, toward the edge of the forest. And what a forest it is. Dense, dark, the kind of place that hums with old stories and colder air. You remember every tale, wolves, spirits, outlaws, even the devil himself. But today, it's full of deer, hopefully. You wait for the signal, a bugle blast, and then you run. Branches slap your face, mud sucks your boots. You yell, you shout. You wave your arms like a lunatic. Birds screech above you, dogs bark behind you. Somewhere, someone falls into a bush and swears creatively. Then, you see it. A deer, slender, fast, glorious. You yell louder, waving your arms in its direction. It bolts, just as the hunters arrive. Arrows fly, dogs surge, chaos erupts. You duck behind a tree and hope not to die. Later, back at the manor, the Lord and his party dine on venison, while you and the other beaters get your reward. A small pouch with 3 silver pennies. Enough for soap, a candle, maybe even a chunk of cheese. Quirky side note. Some noble households would host entire feasts just to show off the kill. There'd be roasted swan, stuffed hedgehog, even peacock served with feathers reattached. Historians still argue whether these events were sincere celebrations or elaborate flexes with a side of indigestion. You don't get peacock, you get stew. But it's warm, it's free, and for the first time in days, you feel like the universe hasn't entirely forgotten you. You walk home under the stars. The forest is behind you, your pockets heavier, your feet are wet. You whistle a bit, quietly, so the night spirits don't notice. Because you're still here, still surviving, and in medieval times that's everything. The days grow shorter now, the sun slipping away before you've even finished your evening chores. The air bites with the first true taste of winter, and every gust of wind feels like it's trying to convince you to crawl back into bed. If only your bed weren't basically just straw and a few animal skins. You can feel the year dying, and you're scrambling to get everything done before the world freezes solid. Winter in the medieval world isn't just a season, it's a threat. You've got to be ready, or you won't make it. So you start preparing. That means preserving food. Everything edible, from cabbage to salted fish, is either drying near the hearth or buried in a pit outside. Your root cellar, if you're lucky enough to have one, is already packed with turnips, onions, maybe a few precious carrots. If you're like most peasants, you don't have a cellar at all. Just hope the rats don't get to your stores first. That's another thing. Rats. Everywhere. Big ones, small ones, all hungry. You've become a reluctant expert in medieval pest control, which mostly involves traps made from bent twigs and prayers to Saint Gertrude, the patron saint of cats and rodent haters. Too bad your only cat wandered off 2 weeks ago, probably to live a freer, warmer life in the church granary. And then there's firewood. You need lots of it. You spend entire days chopping, stacking, and arguing over which logs are driest. You remember that time last year when the pile got soaked in a storm, and you had to burn furniture just to keep the baby's toes from freezing off? This year, you're being smarter, or at least more paranoid. Historians still argue whether peasants actually suffered worse in winter, or if they were simply so used to discomfort that they stopped noticing. Either way, you're bracing yourself. Because in December, cold isn't just cold. It's survival's final boss level. Clothing becomes critical. You don layer upon layer. A woolen tunic, a linen shirt, 2 pairs of hose, maybe a sheepskin if you've managed to trade well this year. There's no such thing as too many layers when your house has more drafts than walls. Your fingers are always numb. Your nose constantly runs. And every time you step outside, the mud freezes in patterns that feel oddly artistic if you squint through your chattering teeth. The hearth is now the center of life, not just for warmth, but for cooking, storytelling, mending clothes, sharpening tools, and yelling at children. It's the beating heart of your home, and you tend it like a sacred altar. You even talk to it sometimes, not because you're losing your mind, probably, but because in a world that keeps trying to kill you, fire listens. One night, your oldest neighbor stops by, her face like bark and her stories older than the manor. She warns of a harsh winter coming, says she dreamed of a white crow, which means deep snow, or famine. Or maybe just bad luck, depending on the version she prefers. You listen, nod, then hand her a warm cup of ale. Quirky fact: many medieval villages had weather witches, or old folk believed to sense the seasons. They'd predict the winter, based on dreams, the behavior of cows, or whether the hedgehogs were sharpening their spines early. It was less science, and more seasonal anxiety wrapped in folklore. You try not to laugh. You also check your hedgehog traps the next morning. Just in case, but it's not all doom. There's one shining light in all this cold and chaos: the midwinter feast. Depending on where you live and what year it is, it might be Christmas, or Yule, or simply feast day of that one saint who liked wine. It's the one time of year when everyone, even the most miserly landowner, feels obligated to loosen their grip on the grain sacks. The manor might host a feast. You might get bread with actual white flour, maybe meat, maybe spiced cider. Your mouth waters just thinking about it. The kids start practicing carols they don't really understand. Someone starts making garlands from dried berries and twine. You help butcher a goose for the feast. It's stringy and smells weird, but it's still goose. You mix flour and lard for little pies, savory, dense, and oddly satisfying. You even risk sneaking a few spoonfuls of honey to flavor them. It's the one week of the year where you might get to feel fancy. Then comes the village gathering. There's music, fiddles, pipes, drums made from hollowed logs, dancing, slow, stompy, hilarious. Drinking, of course. Even Father Benedict, the stern priest who once slapped a kid for blinking too loud during Mass, is seen tapping his foot. You haven't laughed like this in months. One man juggles turnips. A woman sings a tune so haunting, even the fire seems to lean in. A child tries to balance on a pig. It ends poorly, but entertainingly. The night ends with you wrapped in a cloak. Beside the hearth, children asleep in a pile, your belly warm and your heart, miraculously, light. And for just a moment, you forget the cold outside, the dying year, The brittle days ahead. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants found joy in their lives, or if what we call joy was just survival wrapped in music and bread. You're not sure, but tonight, it feels like joy. You sleep with a full belly and dream of spring, even if you know it's still 100 frozen mornings away. Morning after the feast is less dreamy and more, let's call it gritty realism. Your mouth feels like you've been licking wool. Your back hurts from sleeping curled up next to a hearthstone. And someone, probably Cousin Edric, has snored directly into your ear all night. Still, you survived the feast, and now the slow grind of deep winter begins. The days blur together in a palette of grey skies, cold fingers, and a lot of quietly chewing old bread. Your chores don't care that it's cold. Water still needs hauling, animals still need feeding, and your youngest has decided now's the perfect time to ask existential questions like, why is fire hot while you're elbow deep in pig dung? One big concern? Illness. Cold weather brings colds, of course, but it also brings the more serious stuff. Fevers that don't break, coughs that rattle through the walls, strange skin spots, and worst of all, a word no one says out loud unless they're whispering, plague. Now, in your time and village, it's not the Black Death era. We're talking generic 12th, 13th century rural life here, but that doesn't mean you're safe. Disease is like a poorly trained dog. It shows up uninvited, knocks over everything, and lingers far too long. There's no real medicine, not in the way you understand it. Your go-to options are herbs, bleeding, yes, with leeches or knives, prayers and hope. A local healer might mix up a remedy using honey, garlic, and something called dragon's blood, which is neither from a dragon nor blood. Historians still argue whether these remedies were based on empirical trial and error, or just glorified wishful thinking with nice smells. You drink it anyway. When someone gets really sick, they're either quarantined, read, stuffed in a separate room with damp straw and a cross drawn on the door, or taken to the monastery infirmary, which is slightly better because at least the monks are literate. One of your children develops a fever. You panic quietly, trying not to look panicked. You wrap them in every scrap of cloth you own, boil water to make some kind of broth, and murmur Latin phrases you only half remember from Mass. Then you remember the village wise woman said something about mustard poultices. Or was it vinegar socks? You try both. This is where your sense of control truly vanishes. Because in the medieval world, illness is not just physical, it's spiritual, it's superstitious, and it's very, very public. People gossip. Was it bad air? A curse? Did you offend the saints somehow? Are you being punished for skipping fast day and eating that pie? The child recovers, thankfully, but the fear doesn't fade. Now every cough echoes louder. Every sneeze feels like a potential omen. Despite the anxiety, life continues. You fill your days with indoor work, repairing tools, spinning wool, patching up clothes so tattered they're practically nostalgia. You even carve little wooden toys, both as gifts and distractions for the kids, because nothing says medieval parenting like handing your child a doll made of sticks and saying, "Here, play with this, pretend it's smiling." And the nights? Long. You sit by the fire, telling stories, humming songs, sometimes just staring into the flames like they owe you rent. Time moves differently now. The hours stretch, curl around themselves, and fold into days where nothing happens, and yet everything feels tense. One night, an old man knocks on your door. He's a traveling peddler, his clothes stitched from a dozen other clothes, eyes sharper than his years suggest. He offers trinkets, a mirror shard, a wooden comb, a tiny flask of something. Medicinal! You trade a hunk of lard for the comb, because your hair currently resembles a bird's nest, and a bit of dignity never hurts. Quirky fact: traveling peddlers in the medieval world were often sources of not just goods but news. They brought stories from other towns, tales of distant kings, rumors of miracles or monstrous births. Some were reliable. Others were just good at making boredom sound like prophecy. Tonight, the peddler tells you of a neighboring village where a baby was born with 2 thumbs on each hand. Some say it's a blessing, others a curse. The truth? It probably just means he's going to be very good at thumb wars. As winter drags on, your body adjusts. You learn which joints will ache before rain, which windows creak in which kind of wind, and how to make soup from basically nothing. You lose weight without meaning. Everyone does. It's the natural rhythm of life. Feast, then famine. You just hope you come out the other side with most of your teeth. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants considered winter a time of rest or just slower misery. There's no planting, little harvesting, and less work in the fields. But the absence of work doesn't mean an abundance of peace. It just means different worries, tighter belts, and more time to think about things you'd rather ignore, like mortality, like that neighbor who didn't survive last winter, like the fact that spring isn't guaranteed, it's just assumed. But slowly, so slowly, you begin to notice change. The air smells different. Not warmer, just less cold. A bird sings. A patch of mud doesn't refreeze overnight. The sun lingers a few minutes longer. You catch yourself smiling briefly until your breath fogs and you remember it's still February. But it's something. You gather your family and begin taking quiet stock of your supplies. There's not much left. A few jars, a handful of root, vegetables, some crusty bread, but there's enough, barely, to get you through. And that's the most medieval thing of all. Not heroism, not grand battles or epic quests, just making it through. Your child hands you the stick doll you carved last month. It's missing an eye. Its arms are uneven, and it's been dipped in someone's soup. But they love it. They smile. You tuck them in by the fire. You sit back. You breathe in the smoke, the stew, the faint promise of spring hiding under all that frost. You're still here. Somehow. The first day you hear the thaw, it's not so much a sound as it is a feeling. A trickle, a faint, wet drip from the eaves, a patch of earth that squishes instead of crunches. You wouldn't call it warm, not yet, but it's different. And that difference hums inside your chest, like something forgotten waking up. Spring is still weeks away, but you begin to act as though it's closer. You even let the chickens roam a bit farther. One of them falls into a puddle, looks deeply offended, and flaps back home. But hey, progress. Soon, the village starts stirring again. Everyone emerges like groggy animals from hibernation. Neighbors trade news, compare frostbite scars, and gently brag about how little food they had left. We were down to bark and beetle stew. Oh, please, I was gnawing on my own shoe. It's grim comedy, and it helps you forget just how close things came to unraveling. It's time for plowing. The fields, softening under the sun, call for your attention. You strap the oxen to the heavy wooden plow. The beasts grunt, steam curling off their backs. You trudge behind them, boots sinking into the wet earth. Every furrow you carve feels like a promise, a potential loaf of bread, a bowl of stew, reason to hope. Mainstream historical fact: most medieval peasants didn't own their own plows. They were community resources, or loaned out by the manor. Using one often came with a fee or the expectation of extra labor, because nothing in feudalism is ever truly yours. But today, you've got access, and that's enough. It's hard work. Your arms ache, your back tightens, and you've already tripped twice on routes that seem personally vindictive. But with every pass, the field starts looking more like possibility, and less like winter's graveyard. You're not alone. Everyone's in the fields. Children scamper, pretending to plant invisible seeds. Old men walk the furrows, muttering to themselves, maybe praying, maybe just complaining to long-dead relatives. The village buzzes with that first frantic, hopeful energy of spring, like the year is a race, and you all just heard the starting bell. Even the manor lord rides past at one point, nodding regally from his horse. You nod back, hiding the fact that you called him a turnip in boots last week when he raised the tax on firewood. Soon, planting begins. Barley, oats, rye, your spring staples. You scatter seed, rake earth, whisper the old sayings. Some folks leave bread crusts in the corners of their plots, an offering to the field spirits. You're not sure you believe in them, but after this winter, you're not taking chances. Quirky fact: in some parts of medieval Europe, it was believed that the first seed sown must be done with your eyes closed, so you didn't jinx the harvest by seeing it start. It's weird, sure, but also kind of poetic. You try it, stumble over a rock, and decide the spirits will just have to deal with eye contact. There's still risk, of course. Late frosts, flooding, crop blight. Birds who treat your hard work like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had more agency than we assume, whether they could move, petition, or protest bad policies, or if they were simply at the mercy of nature and nobility alike. You suspect the truth is somewhere in between. You can work hard, plan well, and still lose everything to a freak hailstorm. So you hope, you pray, you double-tie the scarecrow, and in between planting, you rebuild. Fences mended, roofs patched, tools reforged. You trade a bag of barley for a better hoe. Your neighbor gives you a handful of garlic cloves in exchange for your extra spoon. It's not bartering so much as community chess. Everyone moving pieces so no one gets left behind. Then come the festivals. You almost forgot what color looked like. Now, spring explodes in flowers, fabrics, painted eggs, and ribbons wrapped around poles. The feast of St. Walburga, or maybe Beltane, depending on how your village rolls. Either way, there's dancing, fire jumping, mead, a lot of singing, that starts beautiful and ends somewhere between wailing and a goat in distress. You laugh so hard your stomach hurts, and for the first time in months you see someone blush. Not from cold, but from flirting. You spot your cousin holding hands with that shy miller's boy. You pretend not to notice, but inside, you grin. New. Love blooms like the barley, sudden, clumsy, full of light. One night, you lie on your back outside, staring up at a sky that feels impossibly huge. The stars don't twinkle like storybooks say. They pulse, flicker, shiver. You imagine each one as a lantern carried by some spirit who survived winter too. You fall asleep there, mouth open, probably snoring, and wake up with dew in your ears and a beetle in your hair. Worth it. Your body is leaner now, stronger too. And your mind, while still haunted by the bite of winter, is sharper, more rooted in the rhythm of things. The hardship didn't kill you, it carved you. Like water-shaping stone, the baby who was sick in February now toddles through the fields, sticky with mud and joy. You think of how close you came to losing them. You don't say it aloud. You just hold them a little longer when they reach for ye. And when the first sprouts push through the soil, just tiny green curls, you kneel beside them, not just to weed or check, but to marvel. They made it. You made it. Historians might debate what survival meant back then. Was it just enduring? Was it thriving in your own way? You think maybe it's both. You may not be rich or free or even comfortable, but you're alive, you're laughing, you're planting hope, one seed at a time. And that, in this world, is a kind of miracle. Spring, as it turns out, is a bit of a trickster. Just when you start to settle into the rhythm of longer days and budding fields, it throws you curveballs. Sudden hailstorms that batter your sprouting barley, neighbors who come knocking with borrowed tools that come back broken, and a goat who decides your laundry line is a snack buffet. Still, the overall vibe is hopeful, muddy and chaotic, sure, but hopeful. You've gotten into a routine. Wake early, feed the animals, work the fields, patch what needs patching, tend to the garden, chase a chicken, lose the chicken, find the chicken in the pigsty, looking smug. Midday meals are no longer the desperate scraping of winter. Now you've got early greens, nettle, watercress, the occasional precious leek. You throw it all into a pot with whatever's left of the salted pork. It's not gourmet, but it doesn't taste like dried sorrow anymore. Then comes the call from the manor. It's time to fulfill your spring labor duties. Ah yes, the joys of feudal obligation. Mainstream historical fact. Most peasants owed corvée, labor, unpaid work for their lord, several times a year. You might have thought you were a free agent with your own field and chickens, but really, you're like an unpaid intern in the feudal system, only with more mud and fewer snack breaks. Today's task, helping the lord's men repair the mill. You trudge over, join a sullen line of villagers, and get handed a shovel. The work is repetitive, the tools are blunt, and the overseer seems to believe shouting equals motivation. You daydream about poking him with the shovel. Gently, of course, but instead, you nod and dig. The mill itself is essential. It's not just for grain, it's for economy, for trade, for village rhythm. Without it, your oats are just oats. With it, they become bread. Or at least a rough approximation of it, quirky tidbit. In some regions, it was forbidden to use hand. Mills at home, lords wanted control of the milling process, and the profit. Historians still argue whether peasants secretly ground grain at night, risking hefty fines, or if that's just one of those rebellious peasant legends. You've definitely heard the stories. Your grandfather once whispered about a woman fined 3 chickens and a blanket for unauthorized milling. You wonder if that's true, or if he just made it up to sound cool. Back home, your own tasks pile up. Your oldest is now old enough to take on more responsibility, so you assign them to herd the geese. They try. The geese chase them back. It's A learning curve. You begin to repair your roof. Again. Spring rains have found every weak spot and exploited it with the precision of an elite tactical unit. You climb up with straw and thatch, balancing precariously, muttering at every passing breeze. Your spouse yells up suggestions that are technically helpful, but mostly just make you grumble louder. But once done, you sit on the roof for a moment and look out. The village isn't much. A cluster of huts, a wobbly fence, a dirt road, but it's alive. Smoke curls up from hearths, children shout, a dog barks, a cow answers, someone laughs too loudly, probably drunk on birch sap mead. Life has returned, stubborn and ragged and real. Then comes the unexpected guest. A traveler, dusty, tired, with a pack full of wares and a mouth full of stories. He says he's from the south near the coast. He's seen ships. He's touched salt water. He sells you a tiny glass bead in exchange for a loaf of bread, and you give it to your youngest, who holds it like it's treasure from the stars. You gather around him by firelight. He tells you of places where palm trees grow, of strange animals with necks like chimneys, of cities where buildings scrape the sky. Maybe it's all lies. Maybe he's just very good at weaving dreams. But you listen anyway, eyes wide, heart soft, because for a moment, your muddy little world feels bigger. Historians still debate how much contact isolated villages had with the outside world. Some say news traveled fast through merchants, monks, and messengers. Others argue most peasants lived and died within 20 miles of their birthplace, never glimpsing beyond the next hill. You're not sure. But tonight, you feel connected to something far away, to time itself, to the long, winding road that stretches beyond your own footsteps. You tuck the children in, bead clutched tight in one little hand. You sit by the hearth, sip what passes for wine, and think of all the things you've survived. The hunger, the cold, the coughing nights, the mud, the Lord, the ox that kicked you, the fish that slipped through your fingers, the child who laughed when you fell in manure. You're still here, not because it was easy, not because you're lucky, but because you're stubborn. Tomorrow will bring more labor, more geese, more unpredictable weather and patchy boots and barter that always seems to leave you one item short. But it will also bring more green in the fields, more light in the sky, and maybe, if the gods are kind, some mushrooms under that log you've been eyeing. You smile, because life in medieval times isn't about comfort. It's not about thriving, in the modern sense. It's about weaving joy from scarcity, grit from hardship, humor from exhaustion, and you? You've gotten pretty good at it. The bead glints in the firelight. Outside, a nightbird calls. You breathe deep and let yourself rest. Summer arrives not with a bang, but with a soft shimmer, the kind of warmth that seeps into your skin rather than smacks you in the face. The fields are tall now. Barley waves in the wind like golden sea foam, and you find yourself touching it as you walk, fingers grazing the stalks like they're sacred. Honestly, at this point, they are. Every day is a calculation now. How much you can harvest, how much you can dry, how many hours you can work before your back protests, and you start negotiating with the universe just to lie down. But the work must be done. There are no sick days in medieval agriculture. Just days when you're sick and harvesting. Your arms are stronger, calloused. Your skin is darker, sunburnt in odd patterns, striped by your rough-spun tunic. You're not exactly fit by modern standards, but you're farm strong, which is the medieval equivalent of CrossFit, minus the Instagram. Mainstream historical fact. Harvesting was an all-hands-on-deck ordeal. Men, women, children, everyone participated. Scythes and sickles in hand, people would work from sunrise to sundown, often fueled by ale and determination. And yes, ale was safer than water. You've definitely learned this firsthand. The water from the stream is still suspicious. You boil it when you remember, but more often you just drink small beer, fermented just enough to kill off whatever. Bacteria medieval science hasn't quite named yet. There's a strange sense of beauty in the routine. You wake early, stretch, and know exactly what your day will be. You'll sweat, you'll eat, you'll scratch an itch you can't reach. You'll trade complaints with your neighbor, who is always certain their barley is taller than yours. It isn't. You measured. You catch moments of peace mid-harvest. A breeze cooling your neck. A butterfly landing on your sleeve. A child running barefoot through the stubble, giggling like they've never known winter. There's also chaos. The ox escapes again. The neighbor's dog knocks over a cart. The miller's apprentice tries flirting and drops an entire sack of flour in the stream. You'd laugh, but that flour was partially yours, and now your bread for next week is floating downstream like a glutinous ghost. Quirky fact. Some medieval communities used communal ovens, scheduled like a very slow bakery. You've had to wait in line to bake your weekly loaf, negotiating time slots like you're booking medieval Airbnb. It's kind of charming, until someone's bread burns, and then everyone blames the nearest scapegoat. Usually the miller's apprentice. Again. Still, spirits are high. You've survived winter, planted spring, and now you're reaping summer. Then, the unexpected twist. A wedding. Not yours. Your cousin's. The one who was blushing earlier in the year? Yeah. Turns out that awkward hand-holding blossomed into full-blown romance. Or at least, as romantic as it gets when dowries include goats and promises of not being super annoying. Everyone gets involved. The bride is dressed in flowers. The groom wears his best tunic, still muddy, but sentiment counts. And the village puts together a feast that scrapes every shelf and storage nook. Bread, root veggies, cheese if you're lucky. Someone even slaughters a chicken. You contribute a jar of preserved plums from last summer. Practically treasure. Someone else brings a pie. No one asks what's in it. You dance, you drink. You sing songs that have been sung for generations. Even if no one remembers what half the lyrics mean. Something about a fox and a maiden, and possibly a cucumber. Historians still argue whether such gatherings were truly joyous for peasants or simply breaks from hardship disguised as celebrations. You figure, why not both? Because that's the secret, isn't it? You take what joy you can. You laugh even when your hands ache. You smile even when the rain ruins your drying herbs. You kiss someone behind the barn, even though your breath smells like onions, and their breath smells like even stronger onions. And you dream. You dream not of castles or riches, but of a full harvest, a mild winter, a year where no one gets fever, where the animals behave, where your child grows strong, where maybe, just maybe, you get a new pair of shoes before your current ones disintegrate completely. One night, as summer begins to tip toward fall, you lie on the grass behind your home. The stars stretch above you. That same old sky, you think about how far you've come, how back in January you didn't know if you'd make it, But now, the fields are full. Your belly's not empty, and there's laughter in the air. You think about the weird bead from that traveler, still tucked in your child's pouch. You touch it sometimes and imagine the ocean. You think about the scarecrow, now sun-bleached and flopped over like it gave up halfway through summer. You think about the ox, snoring in the distance. You think about how tomorrow you'll harvest more rye, and somehow, that's enough. You, a medieval peasant, scrappy, sunburned, and spectacularly underpaid, have managed to survive the year. You've lived through hunger, darkness, labor, laughter, lice, and love. You didn't just survive, you belonged. The stars remain where they've always been, constant, quiet, and so very far away. The warmth of the summer air settles like a blanket, soft and full of the day's fading hum. Your arms, heavy from labor, rest still. The sounds of the village grow hushed, just the faint bleat of a sheep, the rustle of wind through barley, the lull of distant murmurs behind thin wooden walls. You lie back and let the ache in your body melt into the earth beneath you. The sky stretches wide above, and for once, time feels gentle. There is no field demanding your hands, no cart needing repair, no smoke to chase from the hearth. Just this moment, just your breath, slow and even, like the turning of seasons. You are part of it now, the rhythm, the story, the dirt, and the stars alike. Maybe tomorrow brings rain. Maybe the Lord demands more. Maybe your child spills the last of the honey again. But for tonight, you've done enough. You've made it through a world built on hardship, not because you were the strongest, but because you were human, tenacious, clever, kind in small ways that mattered. So close your eyes. Let the fields fade. Let the noise drift far behind. Let your breathing fall in step with a world older than memory, and sleep, deep and dreamless, as the village slips beneath the hush of the medieval moon.